Okay, good morning, everybody. We're calling to order at 9 o'clock on January 29th, the 105th meeting of the Mass Gaming Commission at the Heinz Auditorium in Boston. And we will start directly with our first agenda item, which is surrounding community and ILEVs. If we have any conversations, we don't have any. Ombudsman Ziemba, you're up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, so this is day 2 of our surrounding community discussions. There have been a couple of modifications to our schedule. We heard from City of Melrose that they will not be attending today's hearing relating to both the Mohegan Sun surrounding community petition and the Wynn surrounding community petition. There's been a number of conversations over the last couple of days, and they're proceeding swimmingly, I guess is a good word, if not have reached an agreement or agreement in principle. So that is very good news.
Great.
And potentially there may be an additional change to our schedule relative to the City of Lynn, but we wait news on that. So first up, let me just go over the order of presentations today. We have the City of Everett that is going to be presenting both its surrounding community petition. We've allocated 15 minutes for that. That we give them an additional 5 minutes for their involuntary disbursements petition. And following that, there's a response by Mohegan Sun. That will conclude the Mohegan Sun surrounding community petitioners. Then we'll transition to the Wynn application. We will have Cambridge, followed perhaps by Lynn, and then Saugus is the remaining petitioner. Just in the last day, we've received an involuntary disbursements petition for Saugus, but pursuant to our rules, there's some time for applicant to provide some response. So that was not put forward on the agenda today, so will not be part of the hearing today. It may be talked about by one or more of the parties, but it's not formally before the commission. So let me first call
Excuse
up.
me, John, can we get it formally? Do we, if the parties are willing? I don't know if they are, but.
Well, I think that we have afforded, our process does afford applicants some time to provide some official response, and given the lateness of hour.
Okay. Okay.
So let me first call representatives from the City of Everett. I'll have Jonathan Silverstein introduce his team, and then Kevin Conroe will introduce his team from Mohegan Sun.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to be before you again. Jonathan Silverstein for the City of Everett. With me is James Fitzgerald, a principal of World Tech Engineering, as well as James Erickson, the Executive Director of Planning and Development for the City of Everett. Members of the Commission, the City of Everett is an adjoining community to the applicant host community of Revere. It is adjoined directly by infrastructure, roadway infrastructure to the host community site, which is directly on Route 16, also known as the Revere Beach Parkway. And I'd submit the Revere Beach Parkway in Everett is known as the Revere Beach Parkway for a reason. It's because it provides direct access to the Revere Beach, which I believe Mr. Edis, during his presentation to the Commission a week or so ago, said that some of his hotel rooms were going to have a view of, and Mr. Wynn described the duck boat tour that could get there. If we could go to the first slide. So this is a slide from a presentation that VHB, the applicant's engineer, gave some time ago with respect to the project. You'll see that Everett adjoins Revere. You see Route 16 right there, providing direct access to the site. The slide indicates that 7% of inbound and 17% of outbound trips are going to be using Route 16. The applicant has since revised that to be 18% of outbound trips. The regional planning agency, which the applicant declined to engage in a regional approach to impact analysis, very directly and definitively determined that those trip estimates, significant in and of themselves, are understated, and that a substantially higher proportion of traffic to the site, and I think some of the commissioners expressed this yesterday, as a matter of common sense, a much higher percentage of trips to the Suffolk Downs site will be using Route 16 and coming directly through Everett. If we go to the next slide, you'll see why. In order to use the primary route that the applicant submits, trips will take from the Metro West, Northwest, and North, someone during approaching the site would have to, instead of cutting directly over on the most direct route, they would have to choose to go through Boston, because everyone knows that Boston has no traffic, and they would have to choose to go through the Callahan Tunnel to come back up through a much less direct route, much more circuitous, much more high probability of traffic, tie-ups, and anyone who's tried to go to Logan Airport knows that that is not going to be the preferred route for most individuals. And for that reason, we can just quickly run through some of the additional slides. This was Exhibit J, 1 through J10 of my petition. If we could just briefly run through the next several slides, you'll see that whether you're coming from Burlington, the next slide, Lowell, the next slide, Malden, the next slide, Medford, Nashua, New Hampshire, it's clearly going to be a preferred route for you to take, and that's fine for now, thank you, to take Route 16 through Everett, the Revere Beach Parkway, to get to the Revere host community site. As I indicated, the Regional Planning Agency, MAPC, determined that the applicant's own numbers, significant in and of themselves, are understated. The city's own consulting engineer, World Tech, has similarly concluded that those numbers are understated. One thing I do want to point out is, you look at the mileage count, I do want to point out that with the revised proposal, this is about a mile that, with the original proposal, someone coming in on Route 16 would have had to go south on 1A for about a mile, pull a U-turn, and then go into the project site. With the revised proposal, that's no longer going to be the case. So you're cutting out a mile and a number of trip movements, so it's even more direct, even more easy to get into the project site using Route 16 than it would have been previously. So both MAPD and the city's consulting engineer have determined that the applicant's trip numbers are understated. But let's even look at those trip numbers. If you look at Exhibit O to my petition, VHB on December 30th of last year determined that there would be 226 and 312 respectively west and eastbound trips along Route 16 through Everett during the Friday peak hour. One thing I do want to point out, commissioners, is that the Revere Beach Parkway, and Mr. Fitzgerald can speak to this in greater detail if you'd like him to. The Revere Beach Parkway, unlike a number of roadways that are solely used, or not solely, but primarily used for commuting traffic, is almost as busy during the Saturday peak hour, when the casino traffic will be the heaviest, as it is during the Friday PM peak hour. And so where there's going to be even more trips than VHB indicated, the 226 and 312 during the Saturday peak hour, I think that's an important point, traveling through Everett which has no less than 14 difficult intersections coming onto Route 16 within the space of Everett as you travel from Route 93. In one thing I do want to point out as well is the applicant notes that Sweetser Circle, Route 16 passes underneath it. Still, when you have backups on 16, it affects Sweetser Circle. But one other point that I should make is that Centilli Circle, another very difficult high crash, high traffic rotary, is directly on 16 and will be dramatically impacted as well. I also want to make another point, which is that the applicant argues that, well, Mass DOT didn't require us to look at any areas along Route 16 in Everett or any intersections in Everett. Route 16 is nominally a DCR maintained road, Department of Conservation and Recreation. It is not a Mass DOT road. And as I believe was pointed out by Green International during the Bridgewater hearing when Route 104 was being discussed, MassDOT really only cares about MassDOT roads, and Mr. Fitzgerald can speak to that as well, as can Mr. Erickson. The city has been repeatedly told by MassDOT that MassDOT does not care about Route 16. Additionally, DCR never does any maintenance on Route 16. The city always does the maintenance on Route 16. That's a veritu in Mr. Erickson's affidavit. He can speak to it further, but it has not been rebutted in any way by the applicant. So I think it's important to know that although ostensibly Route 16 is a state road, maintenance, public safety responses all fall on the burden of the city. I know that the notice the commission issued regarding these hearings indicated that you don't want to hear about the back and forth between the applicants and the surrounding communities. And I won't belabor the point. I think I've described it in my petition. But I do want to make the point that we are here because we've had literally no ability to talk to the applicant. Unlike, for instance, the city of Fitchburg, which had tremendous ability to interact with Cordish, unlike the town of Longmeadow, which had a long interaction with MGM, Mohegan and Suffolk Downs literally have refused to speak to the city of Everett. Why? Because Everett is a competing host community. They'll say, well, we were worried they were going to be spending our money on researching ways to torpedo the project. I would submit to the commission, I've been before you a number of times. I hope you've become familiar enough with me to know that I don't play dirty tricks. The letter I sent to the commission on December 6th made 2 points. One, if the applicant was allowed to switch their project midstream, it would be detrimental to Everett as a surrounding community. Why? Because they've refused to talk to us. And two, that as a matter of election law, I didn't think that that the vote in Revere was sufficient to authorize that project to go forward. And I think that's a view that at least some commissioners shared, and a view ultimately that prevailed. So I don't think that the city of Everett has done anything untoward. It's exercised its First Amendment rights to petition government by putting its views before you and asking for a level playing field, that it followed all the rules and the applicant should as well. I don't think any of that justifies the applicant completely ignoring and snubbing all attempts at good faith discussion about surrounding community issues. If we could go to the next slide. I thought it would just be useful to point out or to compare Everett's situation to the two communities that the commission has found to be surrounding communities. You look at the distance from the site to the boundary of the various surrounding communities. Bridgewater, 2 miles, Bolton, 5 miles, Everett, 1.7 miles. Distance to the city center, 4.2 miles for Bridgewater, Bolton 8.1 miles, Everett 2.6 miles. If we could go to the next slide. Peak hour trips, this is the Friday PM peak hour. Bridgewater 55 to 90 is determined by Green. Bolton, 100 to 150 determined by Green. Again, these are not the applicant's numbers in those circumstances, which I think we can all agree the applicant has an interest in understating its numbers. And again, from a common sense standpoint, I think some of the commissioners made that point yesterday, specifically with respect to Route 16. Everett, 226 to 312 peak hour trips, more than double the Bolton numbers. Percentage of casino trips, and bear in mind, order of magnitude, the slots proposal in Leominster was probably going to produce a third to a fourth of the number of total trips of this Category 1 facility. 5 to 8% in Bridgewater, Bolton 11%, as I noted from the earlier slide, 7% inbound, 18% outbound for the Revere proposal going through Everett. Again, both Bridgewater and Bolton are the Green International numbers, whereas the Everett numbers are the applicant's numbers, which both MAPD and World Tech have said are understated. With that, members of the commission, I'll briefly turn it over just to see if Mr. Fitzgerald has any points that I missed with respect to traffic. Of course, if you have any questions, and then I'll move on to the involuntary disbursement issue.
So I'll just touch on a few of the traffic issues that have been discussed. First of all, it has to do with trip distribution. We believe that the amount of traffic that's anticipated to travel along Route 16 is understated. When this was originally brought up in response to the limited information that we had, we were told that the reason that, for instance, Google Maps currently sends traffic via Route 16 instead of Route 1A through the Callahan Tunnel is because the Callahan is currently closed. So but if you look at the travel routes going in the reverse direction, namely through Route 1A, along Route 1A through the Sumner Tunnel onto 93 northbound departing the site, and compare that travel distance to the Route 16 route, Route 16 is actually 3 miles shorter. Without any traffic, the Route 16 route takes 1 minute longer, however. But with traffic, as was mentioned, especially along the lower deck entering the city, certainly that the delays experienced on a Friday evening commute would outweigh the traffic signal delays along Route 16, and traffic would likely be diverted along the Route 16 corridor.
That's something I'm not following here. You're making the point that everybody's going to take Route 16, which, by the way, as a driver, I never would elect to do. But now you're saying that it's, even if there's no traffic, it's slower. Why would people choose Route 16?
Route 16 is 1 minute slower without any delays. When you compare the 93 Route 1 alternative versus the Route 16 alternative, Route 16 is 3 miles shorter, but takes 1 minute longer without any traffic. The lower deck along the expressway is severe traffic, so that would take longer to travel through 93 South, waiting to get onto Route 1A northbound when trying to get to
During
the
peak,
casino.
so
During Friday
is
evening.
there some data for that? Do you know that for a fact?
It's just based on personal experience. I drive through that road frequently, and actually, quite honestly, I've cut through Route 16 to try to avoid the lower deck myself. Sometimes those delays
Okay.
can be just a parking lot. Also, when talking about changes, so when the Callahan Tunnel is closed, Route 16 is one of the detour routes that's out there. And we've been told that traffic signal alterations have been made at the signals along the Route 16 corridor. We haven't seen any data or information to show the before and after if these signal alterations have improved the congestion along the Route 16 corridor or not. But one thing I do want to point out is that traffic fluctuates over the course of a year from month to month. Traffic volumes tend to be lighter in the winter months than they are in the summer months, and that's likely why the Callahan Tunnel may be closed during a few months in the winter, as opposed to during the summer. So certainly need to look at the summer volumes as well to see the full picture of what the traffic operations are along Route 16. Another point that I'd like to bring up is that in reviewing the January 22nd memo that was provided regarding traffic, this discussion about trips, traffic volumes generated from the casino, based on Exhibit C in that document, it appears that the volumes that are being presented are that just for the patrons only and not for employee trips. We certainly want to be looking at the complete picture again and looking at what the employee trips are going to be and where satellite lots will be located and how that also impacts Route 16. Lastly, regarding Saturdays, just to expand on what was previously mentioned about Saturday volumes, the westbound traffic volume around Route 16 appears to be almost pretty close to what the traffic volume is heading westbound on 16 during the Friday peak period. But with the Saturday condition, you've got increased trips being generated by a casino, on top of the fact that in the westbound direction in particular, at least at this point, the trips are estimated at 18%. So not only do we need to look at the Friday, which is very important, but also along Route 16, the Saturdays have to be addressed and looked at to make sure that the Route 16 corridor, any impacts to traffic operations are mitigated.
What does the 18% figure mean?
I'm sorry, it's 18%. What's currently being estimated in BHB study is that 7% of entering site traffic will travel via Route 16 eastbound.
Oh, you were using their 18%?
Yes, and they're 18.
Okay.
They're saying 18%. A heavier distribution will be for exiting.
All right. Do you have any idea what percentage of trips the 226 or the 312 is? What the additional? Is that part of the? Is that in the data in the?
Commissioner, I believe, according to, and this again is Exhibit O to my petition, the December 30th, 2013 memo from VHB, they claim that will reflect 4% and 6% increase in volumes west and east of Route 99 respectively.
And do you have any data that counters that?
We don't, Commissioner, and this will segue into the disbursement request.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so we don't know if there's any decrease in the service level from that 4 to 6%.
We don't specifically. I would note that DCR, MAPD again, PC did not agree with those distribution numbers, and that I believe that the Bolton and/or Bridgewater changes in percentage increase in traffic were comparable. But I don't think we.
Well, I
can
understand
say
that,
right
but those are very different roads from Route 16. I mean, those are. We were talking about 117, which is a 2-lane road. This is a very different road,
but
with
again,
different interchanges. So
agreed. But a percentage of traffic is a percentage of traffic, and so since Route 16 carries a lot more traffic, and I would submit there's a lot more problems,
okay. Right.
that it's a proportional increase.
Okay, I take your point.
I didn't touch on some of the other issues. Again, Mr. Erickson is here. He can speak to the rampant problems the city is experiencing with insufficient resources to address illegal apartments and hotbedding. I do want to note one thing, which is that the applicant claims that there are going to be regional benefits. I'm quite certain there will be. I would submit that given the attitude and approach the applicant has taken to date with the city of Everett, it's going to do everything it can to avoid giving Everett any benefits. It's not going to use Everett vendors. It's entered into agreements with a number of other communities much farther away from Revere than Everett, committing to use their vendors. I think unless they're compelled to do so, they're not going to provide any benefits to the city of Everett.
Well, there won't be any competitive reason to do that, right?
To
I
do
mean,
what, Commissioner?
To punish Everett, when the dust settles, if Mohegan Sun gets the license, then there's no competitive reason to punish Everett. I mean,
Well, there's
I thought
no
you started
competitive
out.
reason to do it now, I would submit.
Well-
You know, including them in surrounding community discussions. You know, I represented West Springfield when they were a competitor to MGM. MGM was talking to us from day one. So I'd submit there's no reason for Everett to, for Revere to simply, Mohegan and Suffolk to simply refuse to speak with us. From a competitive standpoint, I don't think it's in the spirit of what this commission has suggested all along.
Well, that's a different question.
And I don't see how it gives them a competitive advantage, frankly. I think it's a matter of animus, and I think that animus will continue. If I might, I'll turn briefly to the surrounding community, to the involuntary distribution petition. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into preparing the petition that's before you. That work was a matter of trying to evaluate impacts. That is a function that the legislation and your regulations suggest should be reimbursed by the applicant if Everett is found to be a surrounding community. So the fact that the applicant forced us into this position, forced us to have a lot less ability to evaluate impacts, to speak with them, forced us into this position to try to evaluate impacts in a vacuum. They shouldn't benefit from that, and the city shouldn't be hurt by that. It's all part of evaluating impacts and trying to negotiate an agreement. So the argument in the application, or in the opposition to the application, that they shouldn't have to pay for this process, I would submit, is simply inaccurate. I would note also, they repeatedly state the city didn't comment on the DEIR. I've just confirmed the city never received the DEIR. Certainly it should have, but it didn't. It would have commented had it. But even putting that aside, it doesn't give up its right to seek to do its own independent analysis. It would have been just as much of a disadvantage with the lack of information and lack of consultant funding back then as it is now. And I would further note that certainly the city will be commenting on the notice of project change that the applicant claims it's going to be filing. The applicant does not take issue with either the World Tech proposal or with the Consulticon proposal, the economic impact proposal. They don't challenge those numbers. What they say is we shouldn't have to pay for everything up front. Well, respectfully, that's the way the letter of authorization and grant process works. If all that money isn't used, the difference goes back to the applicant. So we're only using that process because that's the process that the commission has established. They do take issue with my proposal, the legal proposal. They contest the suggestion that they should have to pay for the surrounding community petition process. I just addressed that issue. All the work I did in this process was solely to try to evaluate impacts and to get to the point where we can negotiate a surrounding community agreement.
What's the total amount that you've petitioned for?
The total amount I petitioned for is $60,000. For legal. And I'll say, Chairman, that I have spent probably 40 to 50 hours trying to deal with the applicants and their counsel, preparing the surrounding community petitions, meeting with city officials and consultants. It's a very involved process. And
the total amount for the entire disbursement?
I believe it was 50 for World Tech, 60 for the other. So 145 was the total.
Okay.
And I would note, members of the commission, that had the applicant, Mohegan was going to pay a much higher consultant bill when it was in Palmer than that. But it would have been lower than they would have had to have paid had they not used the RPA process. I think they were going to pay a couple $100,000 through the RPA process, which was going to analyze impacts for all of the surrounding communities, and they were going to pay the legal bills of each community. I would note that they paid $12,000 to the town of Munson for legal bills, and they never even got close to the actual negotiation of an agreement. They were still in the early stages of the RPA impact analysis. And so I really don't think those legal bills are at all out of whack when you look at the fact that they paid $12,000 for a community that didn't have to petition and hadn't even started to negotiate. I want to address the argument that they shouldn't have to pay for the city of Everett to research ways to undermine their project or torpedo their project. Again, you know, I hope that the commission is familiar enough with me to know that I'm going to be above board with my billing. I would not bill to the applicant work that was not related to evaluating impacts and negotiating an agreement. And certainly I have no intention of doing that, but I'll make that commitment to the commission now. Had the applicant used an RPA process, it would have been much cheaper. They wouldn't have had to have paid impact consultants for each community. That was their choice. It was their choice to freeze Everett out of the process from day one. We're in a situation now where we're going to have to essentially have consultants who drop everything and dedicate the next several weeks, if we're designated, to do this impact analysis. There's a cost associated with that. Again, had MAPD been given the opportunity to do this impact analysis, we wouldn't be looking for anywhere near the amount of money that we are.
That was a different applicant. I mean, you're
Well-
conflating SSR and Mohegan Sun?
I'm not, Chairman. I think they are. You'll note that the letter I got from Chip Tuttle on January 8th, was responding well after the applicant had switched, responding to my numerous requests to be contacted. Meanwhile, Mohegan Sun has been in the process for quite some time. They could have enlisted MAPD. They could have started giving us information and letting us hire consultants. They literally refused to talk. Literally refused to talk and made it clear in no uncertain terms that the reason is that Everett is a competing host community and that Everett had spoken out twice on issues of public concern that it had every right to do. So I don't think I am conflating. I think it's clear that Chip Tuttle has been involved and Suffolk Downs has been involved in every stage of the surrounding community negotiations. They've made it clear in press releases, in their response to Everett's petition. So respectfully, I don't think I am conflating it. But certainly Sterling Suffolk could have engaged the RPAs. MSM could have engaged the RPAs, or they could have let us use some of these consultant dollars. But it's not Everett's fault, is my point. And these are good faith proposals that Everett has received from recognized professional entities, whether it's legal, traffic, or economic consulting. They've not provided any suggestion, any information to suggest that these are inflated numbers or illegitimate numbers.
Okay, I think we got the drift, I think.
Appreciate it.
I have a question. So the city has firsthand access to the numbers that the wind proposal would generate in terms of traffic studies and the like. Have you looked at those numbers in terms of, and I know they're different projects, but there's an argument that there will be increased traffic in Route 16 about either project. Have you looked at those numbers and compared them to make assumptions about the other project?
We've looked at them to a certain degree, Commissioner. I think Mr. Fitzgerald could speak more to this. But there's a great deal of mitigation taking place in Everett if the wind proposal goes forward. So that's less of a concern, but certainly I think the wind numbers are higher on Route 16, and I think it does inform the fact that certainly you would expect some trips to come in on Route 16 for that proposal as well. So yes, I think that it is worthwhile to look at that. I don't think it's, and again, we haven't had the funding to have World Tech do a real in-depth analysis to compare those proposals and how they would respectively impact Route 16, but or to compare it. Certainly, we've looked at it from Route 16 itself. I don't know if you have any more specific questions about that. I'm certain Mr. Fitzgerald could answer it.
There is obviously going to be traffic going from the Wynn Casino onto Route 16. Totally different projects, totally different distributions. However, yes, there will be traffic going on Route 16. A lot of the traffic from the Wynn project is anticipated coming in from the other way because of its very close proximity to 93. But to address the traffic coming in along Route 16, right now there are a number of costly mitigation measures, including especially over at Santilli Circle in particular, to try to accommodate these that already overburdened locations, Santilli, Sweetser, excuse me, locations such as that to handle that. I believe the current proposal is for raised interchange at Santilli, for instance. It's a very complex, Santilli Circle is a very complex location. It's a combination of a traffic circle with a road traveling through and traffic signals.
I think I've gotten lost around there every now and then.
Yes, sir. Mr. Conroy.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Kevin Conroy, representing Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts. Today with me is Charlie Baker from DLA Piper, also representing Mohegan Sun. We have John Kennedy, again from VHB, and Bruce Barnett with DLA Piper. Things are moving really quickly on our surrounding community front, and things actually changed since yesterday, and I wanted to give you a quick update. And Mr. Ziamba mentioned it, Ombudsman Ziamba mentioned at the beginning. We have designated Melrose as a surrounding community, and yesterday, while I was talking to you, we entered into a surrounding community agreement with Melrose yesterday. We have had 12 communities that have approached us seeking surrounding community status. 10 of those communities we have designated, and 7 of those communities right now we have agreements with. We are working really hard with Boston, Saugus, and Winthrop, the remaining 3 communities who we have designated who we don't have agreements at this point. You heard yesterday from Somerville. We continue to have discussions with Somerville, and today we are addressing Everett. We also, as you know, entered into an agreement yesterday with the Lynn Auditorium, and so the 2 theaters that approached us seeking ILEV status, we've designated and we have entered into agreements with. So we're working very hard on that. We did, as the Commissioner mentioned, join this project somewhere in early December. We specifically at that point made a decision that we had to go directly to these communities and not participate in the regional process with the MAPC. I think we've seen a lot of success in that. Our ability to already enter into 7 agreements with the 12 who have approached us. That was a decision we made, and one that I think has kind of worked out for us. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie Baker to discuss Everett.
Thanks, Kevin. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Let me just address the 6 criteria that are in front of you. Proximity. It is true that the 2 communities share a border. There's a 3/4 mile border. There aren't any major roads that cut through that border in between the 2 communities. And I would simply note that the fact of a border in your decision is related to the 2 sister cities of Fitchburg and Leominster are not dispositive. Transportation. I'm going to leave the in-depth, most of Council's presentations on transportation. I'm going to leave the transportation discussion to John Kennedy, who's a very well-respected transportation expert. I would note a couple of things. This issue of what the MAPC found. The MAPC's letters doesn't say they found anything. They have a belief, and they laid out that belief in their comments to MIPA. MIPA and DOT reviewed that belief and concluded that their views were correct and the MAPC's position wasn't. Doesn't mean that further work and research couldn't happen, but I don't want anyone to think that MAPC's views have not been fully vetted by the agencies responsible for the transportation infrastructure in the Commonwealth. As it relates to that, I'd like to note that the project, both the current project in the Mohegan Sun frame and the Suffolk project, have regular and frequent meetings with both DOT and DCR. And we have addressed with them the impacts that we have on every intersection in the area, including all the DCR roads. And the issues raised by Everett have simply not come up in any of those meetings. And I would note, having spent a lot of time with DCR on meetings about this project, because as I think the commission may be aware, one of the important regional improvements that the project's going to pay for is a fix at Route 1 and 16, which actually will have a lot of benefits for residents of Everett. I can tell you with great certainty that DCR has great concern about the operation of their roads. They care passionately about their operation of their roads. And the idea that somehow this road in Everett, even though it's owned by DCR, DCR ignores it, I would simply reject. There's this issue of Bolton, and I know the commission's...
Who pays for upgrades for DCR?
Physical maintenance evidently is paid for by Everett. I don't know enough to qualify that. But the physical upgrades in the sense of improvements are paid for by DCR. Or in our case, when the improvements they've asked us to make, the private person will make them. When people have projects, they pay for upgrades. But I can tell you, just having sat in meetings with DCR, they've made significant improvements on Revere Beach Parkway. It's a road they deeply care about. And council's right, it's a road that goes to their beach. And there is no doubt about that. I would also note, just as a correction, there was an implication that the entrance to the project on Winthrop Avenue didn't exist in the prior project. That's just not correct. That entrance on Winthrop Avenue existed in the prior project and exists today. Just a little mention on Bolton, because Bolton came up. I'd just simply point out that the impact on a two-lane road in Bolton, where actually there's a lot of traffic because there are a lot of people who live there now. From when I grew up, it's a different place. It is very different than this 6-lane road we're talking about. That is, I would focus you on the words of your regulations, is a state road and not a local road. Development didn't really come up in the presentation, but I just want to address it because it's in the petition. There are issues of construction mitigation. And I would simply point out that this proponent has entered into a legally binding commitment that it will enter into a construction management plan with the city of Revere. That plan has been filed and is an attachment to the DEIR, and will be further upgraded, noted in the notice of project change that will be filed on January 31st, and will be fully laid out in the final EIR that the project goes through. I can just tell you that all those relevant agencies care deeply. DCR cares a whole lot about traffic impact on Route 16, as an example. They've had extensive discussions with us about truck traffic. So I think there is another forum where that those matters are being dealt with. I would also note that there is no required construction management plan in the Everett HCA as opposed to the Revere HCA. So the sudden concern of this applicant on this issue is of interest to me. Operations. I just want to point out that even though, again, council didn't bring it up, it's in their petition. Exhibits 14 and 15 of our opposition lay out the fact that both the fire chief and the police chief in Revere do not believe that there'll be additional mutual aid needs, mostly because of all the extra mitigation that they'll be getting. And then as it relates to the issue of code enforcement and hotbedding, I think that the commission's very aware of the fact that in our studies we submitted in RFA2 and in other studies the commission's aware of, there's no real evidence that there's a negative impact on housing in the region. We spent a lot of time thinking about this. We were required to study the matter in our Revere negotiations. So there's extensive, research on this question. This project is a legally binding commitment to use best efforts to hire 75% of its workforce within 15 miles of the project. There's no expectation that there are going to be a bunch of people moving in from somewhere and just camping out. Other is the last criterion, and the applicant did not make any assertions of others, so I'll leave that alone. As it relates to this, I guess I'm going to turn it over to John, and I'll leave our discussion of the involuntary disbursement after that. So John, you want to?
Thank you. Good morning. John Kennedy from Vanasshang and Brustlin. I'm just going to focus on three major points that were questioned in the petition: our trip generation, our trip distribution, and the trip assignments, where we loaded traffic, how things will actually function. Our trip generation was, again, very much vetted through Mass DOT as we went through the process. In fact, the trip generation numbers that we used, about 0.3 trips per gaming position during that critical Friday peak period that I talked about, a few more in than out, matches very closely with the trip generation profile in the Everett site, which is 0.29 trips, with slightly more out than slightly in. So in terms of the numbers that we used when we got into the actual loading of the site, everything is very, very much balanced. When it comes to trip distribution, we vetted our process through a series of gravity models that were provided by the sponsor, by the operator. We brought those to Mass DOT about a year ago as we were starting to prepare the ENF. Mass DOT asked us to modify them a little bit, to shift some of the demand to the north, to the point where we have about 51 or 52% of our traffic coming from the north, and I'll call north east of a line halfway between Route 2 and Route 93, and the balance from the south and the west. Much less from the south, believe it or not, because there's competition. A little bit more from the west, even with the future competition. So we have got a difference that favors the north. In looking at the trip distribution pattern for the Everett site, they are very much skewed to the south and the west. They've only got about 40% or 40 to 45% of their traffic approaching from the north in that basic line I talked about. The rest is coming from the south and the west. So by virtue of the fact that we have looked at an 18% demand in the Route 1 corridor compared to their 9% demand in the Route 1 corridor, we're actually putting a little bit more traffic on Mystic Valley Parkway and Revere Beach Parkway than the Everett project had envisioned, and we're managing it. So distribution, when it comes to distribution, we also looked, and Mass DOT has accepted our findings in terms of what the way, and DCR has supported it, the way we have assigned trips to get to the site. We have held that the inbound traffic will primarily stay on I-93 southbound, not use the Route 16 roadway. Route 16 has got, I don't know, between 10 and 15 traffic signals, and if you listen, they're congested. To get to the Suffolk Downs site in Revere, again, I'd stick with the highway. If the highway cost me 1 or 2 or 3 minutes of delay to break through, because once you get beyond a certain point, things flow much better, and you've got a direct shot into the Callahan Tunnel. Coming out of the Callahan Tunnel, there'll be 2 signals. One at Boardman Street currently experiences a lot of delay. That's going to be resolved. In fact, our base design volumes in our design for the Boardman Street intersection are 65% greater than today's volumes. So we're really loading up that intersection, and we're finding we can get it to function very well. And then the jug handle. which is, again, something that is being improved with the addition of a third lane. So we're we're making it easier to get in on Route 1A through the Callahan Tunnel. The issue with taking traffic out of the site, we are projecting that 18% of our traffic that is destined, that's leaving the site is going to use Route 16. One simple matter, a $3.50 toll to come back through the Sumner Tunnel. We decided that we were going to take a very conservative view of this and relocate that traffic along the Route 16 corridor to get to I-93, to get to a series of uses. That demand does add traffic. In fact, when you compare the 18% that we've got running in that corridor, it's greater than the total amount of traffic that the WIN proposal has using Route 16 westbound, because they're only assigning 9% to Route 1 southbound, 1% from Revere, and a few other percent from internal sites. So the way they've loaded their system is not to where we are. The eastbound traffic coming from I-93, it's also interesting to note that we were told, or based on the information that people seem to be putting in front of us, everybody's going to get off at Route 16. The WIN review didn't take everybody off at 16. It brought traffic down through the Sullivan Square off-ramp, onto Moffa Way, and through Sullivan Square. Now, I don't know, Sullivan Square can be pretty difficult still, but about 1/4 of their site traffic coming from the I-93 corridor was relocated and not brought in Route 16, but taken to the south. So again, the argument that it's easier to get in Route 16, in this case, with a series of right turns, doesn't really jive with the distribution that we're looking at. When it comes to total trips, the amount of traffic that's generated, and we do have information that we would be more than happy to provide on the employee demands, we're looking at about between 40 and 50 employees arriving at the site during the afternoon peak hour. 30% of our employees are expected to be on transit. The other employees are not going to be permitted to park on site. The Mohegan Sun is talking with Paul Revere Transportation about shuttle buses, remote pickups, and just to reduce the amount of employees that are in the system. And oh, by the way, we assumed that there were 90 employee trips in our analysis coming to or past the site, just to load them in to be absolutely conservative in what we do. The need for improvements in the Route 16 corridor have been identified as something that is very much desired. There's talk about Santilli Circle being a congested location. Well, by documents contained in the draft EIR prepared for the Everett site, Route 16 east and westbound is level of service A, passing through the circle. The bad intersection is the east intersection with the loop coming from on the shopping center side, taking traffic out and bringing it up toward Route 99. That's a level of service D. The approach can be very easily modified and improvements can very easily be made if that is something that is desirable. But the operation in the Route 16 corridor at that point is the best at any point in the entire corridor. There are two intersections on Route 16, Ferry Street and I believe Everett Avenue, that are shown as poorly operating within the draft EIR that was filed. And in fact, there is mitigation proposed at those two locations as part of the Everett site. Signal timing changes. I can speak on behalf of of Mohegan Sun and Sterling Suffolk Raceway and say that we'd be happy to make those signal timing changes, because that's all it is. It's something that can be done by a contractor, and the numbers are there to be designed. It's just something that gets carried to DCR with a request for a change. I think it can be implemented for under $2,500. And that takes care of the build condition with the Everett site. So again, I think as we go through this, when we start looking at the amount of traffic that's placed in the corridor and put in the corridor, it is a regional corridor, it is 6 lanes wide. The numbers, 250 to 300 trips per hour by direction split, may seem a little bit high, but it is traffic that can be absorbed. And I'd like to reiterate something that I said yesterday. We have included I guess an agreement has been reached, the surrounding communities agreement was reached with Medford because of Wellington Circle. And Mohegan Sun is committed as part of that agreement to look at the operations of Wellington Circle because that's where the true impact is in the Route 16 corridor. And it's primarily on the westbound side of the corridor where through traffic destined I-93 and up Route 28 into Medford is concentrated in 2 lanes. So when all is said and done, yes, we are adding traffic. The traffic is spread over 6 lanes. The traffic is passing through 2 intersections which are congested at this point. They can be mitigated for under $2,500 using information that's already available. And in fact, that mitigation may have already happened as part of the Callahan Tunnel closure process because Route 16 is a primary detour corridor. We fully disagree with the concept that people will avoid the Callahan Tunnel to get to the site because the Callahan Tunnel is currently running, even with the build condition in the year 2023, at only about 2,650 vehicles. In 1995, prior to the opening of the Ted Williams Tunnel to general traffic, the tunnel was carrying in excess of 3,500 vehicles in the afternoon peak hour in that single direction headed toward the airport. Plenty of capacity is available. So we see no reason why people wouldn't stay on the highway to continue on rather than get off at Route 16, but we have assumed that there would be a movement to Route 16 to start with.
What's the peak hour total flow on Route 16?
Oh, you're challenging me.
Just, what's the order of magnitude of the increase?
I am going to guess that the order of magnitude of the increase is 4%, 3 to 4%.
So 20 times that.
Yeah,
So
it's probably, I'm going to guess the two-way volume approaching the intersections is probably on the order of 4,000 vehicles. So we're adding 250, so 5% to 6%.
Do we have access to a map of Route 16? I think one of the presentation slides may be helpful.
Okay.
I'd like to get a view of what you were just referring to, Mr. Kennedy, so.
Actually, I've got a board that might be a little bit, not quite of that, but it's more of a regional plan that might be helpful.
Well, whatever you think may be helpful, I would like to understand the location of Centilles Circle and in reference to Wellington Circle and the improvements that you were just talking about.
Okay. Chantilly Circle is just over the river, the next controlled intersection from Medford. The circles will go Wellington Circle to Chantilly Circle, and then the next circle is Sweetser Circle. There is no signal between Chantilly Circle and Switzer Circle, and in fact, Route 16 passes under Chantilly Circle. And our loading of Chantilly Circle itself is just minor related to what is coming in from Medford, or from Everett, and a little bit from Medford.
So is Centilles Circle the access to the commercial center, the Target and
That's
our
correct.
Bank of New York?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You finished?
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Yeah, so let me just deal with the involuntary disbursement. I would want to note, and because the applicant made the point that that people have an interest in lowballing numbers. As John said, and as actually as DOT and the other state agencies have confirmed, our traffic analysis is actually conservative. We are counting employees going to the property who we have a plan for them not to go to the property. We have a plan for people to take public transportation because there's a subway station literally next door to this new project. We're not counting that as fulsome as we can. So I think that the numbers that John has presented and that you have in your filings are higher than accurate, and purposely so, because this project made a commitment that it would improve every road it impacted, and I believe that there's every evidence in front of you that is in fact the case. As it relates to involuntary disbursement, I just simply make a couple of points. One, the request that they've made is 3 times the amount that the commission set aside for what they thought a community would need, the $50,000. I would just note that. Secondly,
The statute said that.
statute says, correct, I'm sorry, sir.
Right.
Okay.
And that was for all
All the communities.
surrounding communities.
Right.
And how that number was derived,
Well, the legislature in its wisdom concluded.
in its
so.
wisdom,
The second point I would make is I really don't believe that it's necessary for this independent traffic analysis. There is plenty of opportunity to comment through the DEIR process. Council made the point that they didn't receive a copy of the DEIR. They certainly knew enough about it to send a letter to you saying that it's invalid. So I would just make that point. The second point I would make is, as it relates to these other socioeconomic studies, I think that they can rely on the studies they used before they entered in the HCA with Everett. It's certainly all the same issues applied, and I'm sure they thought about those matters very carefully. As it relates to this notion of animus, we don't have any animus to Everett. We really don't. We note and we observe that they are attacking the project. We note and observe that there are friends of the mayor who funded the opposition to the campaign. Those are facts. We have every reason to think that we can deal with them on an even basis. We're just now in a process where they are trying to support their project. We understand that. Faced with the same situation, the mayor of Revere decided, I'm not going to try to be a surrounding community. We talked about this when we drafted the HCA. He thought it was a complete conflict of interest because he was wearing 2 hats. And so we don't believe that there's a basis for them being a surrounding community. And so we're not choosing to ignore them because there's an animus. It's just we don't believe there's a basis that they're a surrounding community. And I would also just make a point that the commitments that this applicant has made, that best efforts matter in a legally binding way, to hire people locally within 15 miles, to buy produce and goods within 15 miles. That applies to everybody, and certainly there's no belief on our part that anybody in Everett should have any negative impact based on the actions of their government officials.
And I just wanted to quickly say, I neglected to leave out of my introductory remarks. What we've been able to accomplish on surrounding communities could not have been done without the advice and assistance of your staff. John Ziamba, Nancy Stack, and Catherine Blue. We call them a lot. They provide us advice. They've been very, very helpful to this process. And the fact that we didn't have to have a hearing today on Melrose and a hearing yesterday on Lynn and the things that is in part because of their work. So I just wanted to thank them in front of you because they've been an incredible resource to us.
Thank you. Before we go back, anybody, commissioners, did you want to respond?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, in their opposition to our application, and just now, Mr. Baker keeps referring to some letter supposedly that the city of Everett sent regarding the DEIR. I haven't seen that letter. I don't know if Mr. Erickson has.
I'll get a copy of it.
I appreciate it. I'm not aware of any such letter having been sent. In any case, that was an issue that was raised by the Boston Globe very recently, not back when the DEIR was first filed. So I don't think it has any relevance to the petition. But in any case, certainly the city has not had the opportunity to have its own traffic consultant look at this issue. It would have been happy if MAPC could have looked at the issue for it. That wasn't an option given to it. And in terms of the $50,000 repeatedly raised, well, every single applicant has spent far more than that. I don't think anyone in this room believes that that $50,000 was meant to be the be-all, end-all, and it certainly hasn't turned out to be that way. As I noted, Mohegan Sun was going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the RPA process and other surrounding community disbursements, and never suggested that that was inappropriate, only with respect to the city of Everett. And so if the commission has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know, Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have anything you wanted to specifically respond to with respect to the traffic presentation?
One thing that I would like to say is obviously, if Route 16 is a very efficient corridor in that the traffic signals are free-flowing and delays, significant delays, aren't experienced along this corridor that's 3 miles shorter, 3 miles shorter of a travel route, then wouldn't more vehicles travel along that roadway? Route 16, especially Santilli Circle on a Saturday, especially during winter periods or heavy shopping periods, is pretty congested, and people try to avoid it as a result. So I guess my question is which one is it? Is it a very efficient corridor for vehicles to go, and therefore more trips will travel down this corridor? Or is it congested to the point that if you add more trips to it, then you're just going to overburden, you're going to add traffic to already overburdened intersections. So again, without having the evaluations or analysis to review, I can't really answer that for the.
But the logical extension of that is if you don't fix it, it's better, right?
If you don't fix it, it's.
Yeah, because fewer people will use it. I mean, if you fix it, more people will use it, and that's not good. If you don't fix it.
Well, it's already
Broken.
yeah, it is already broke, but is it to the point of, how are the backups along neighboring streets and things such as that?
Right. Okay.
And Commissioner, I think under the applicant's own numbers, about 1 million trips per year will go through Route 16 in Everett. And so whether that is increased because the roadway gets better, or it's just that 1 million trips because the roadway is still difficult, that's a substantial amount of traffic coming through Everett, that when there are traffic accidents, Everett Public Transportation, Public Safety Services will have to respond to. When there are storms, Everett plows that street. And again, there are 14 intersections, 14 streets coming in to Route 16 in Everett, local streets, difficult intersections that people have to navigate. Apart from level of service, there's still difficult intersections. When you have more traffic, you have greater possibility of conflict. When you're adding 1 million trips per year, that's a substantial amount of traffic. And I don't know how the applicant can voluntarily designate Malden and Salem and Medford and every single community except Everett and Somerville, the two that they perceive as negative, and argue that they're going to mitigate traffic problems on roads where they're going to have 1% of their traffic distribution, intersections along 1A, a state highway, that requires mitigation, but not Route 16 is illogical.
Got it. Thanks.
If we can, just for a second.
My only comment on some of the intersections that are only seen in 2% corridors, 2% projection corridors, they were addressed because they were part of our MEPA scope that was agreed to by MEPA, the surrounding communities, or not the surrounding communities, the host communities at the time, DCR, and MassDOT. We looked at them because we were asked to. We didn't look at anything in the Route 16 corridor west of Webster Street in Chelsea because we weren't asked to. And the city of Revere has asked us to go in and make some signal improvements, whether it's phasing changes or timing changes and some resurfacing within those intersections. Again, that's why those intersections were included in the study scope.
And I just make the point, and we'll separately send it to you, because it's not fair to you to have to go through the voluminous filings, but if you look at the DOT and the DCR comment letters on our project, the idea that these state agencies have not given great thought to this and have really thought through the impacts on the regional road system that they own and control, I just don't think there's a basis for it. And the only thing I'd just say is, at least Mohegan Sun, there is no negative animus as relates to anybody, and certainly that was not the reason this Somerville hearing happened yesterday.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, folks.
Thank you.
We'll be back to you. And thus concludes Mohegan Sun.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd like to ask representatives from the city of Cambridge to come down to the table. I'll ask Lee Giannetti to do the introductions of the team.
See you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
They've got the binders? They've got the binders? Yeah.
And we're also joined by the WIN representatives, and I'll ask Kim Sinatra to introduce her team when it comes time for the WIN presentation.
Okay, everybody ready? Who is starting for Cambridge?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good morning. My name is Lee Giannetti. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Relations for the City of Cambridge. With me is Sue Clippinger, Director of Traffic, Parking, and Transportation, and Police Commissioner Robert Haas. We're before you today.
I should disclose that I used to work with Sue Clippinger hundreds of years ago, back when I was in the transportation business. Nice to see you again. Okay.
We're before you today to present our case as to why Cambridge should be designated a surrounding community for the Wynn Everett project. As a city, we're fortunate to have a thriving economy, a robust housing market, a vibrant and expanding tourism and entertainment industry, not to mention a couple of universities. We're not here because we believe this designation will solve a particular problem in Cambridge or will be a source of unexpected money. We know how to deal with issues in our community. We invest enormous amount of resources into planning for disasters, planning for traffic mitigation, planning for development, and planning for Cambridge's future. The proposed casino in Everett, because of its proximity to Cambridge, presents potentially significant impacts on developing residential and commercial areas in Cambridge. It threatens our careful and successful transportation planning, and it will potentially increase demands on our police force, and it threatens our mature hospitality and tourism industry. Both Sue Clippinger and Commissioner Haas will address some of the ways that Cambridge will be impacted in the importance of regional coordination and cooperation.
Good morning. I'm Sue Clippinger. I'm the Director of the Traffic, Parking, and Transportation Department in the City of Cambridge. And I just want to talk a little bit about the transportation issues that we're concerned about. We basically see the casino as creating regional traffic and transit challenges. and that we feel they have to be addressed at a regional level, and that the impacted region of the surrounding communities should include the city of Cambridge. We believe that the 4% of trips that were shown to cut through Cambridge along Washington Street is understated, and that if those trips end up on Prospect Street, for us, that's a 20% increase in traffic. And we feel that the traffic congestion at the heavily congested intersections will serve to focus additional traffic onto Washington Street above what was in the study, and those come in through Cambridge. We also do not believe that 0% of trips are going to cut through Cambridge on the Gilmore Bridge. Rutherford Ave congestion and congestion in the general area is likely to cause some people to use that route. And if only 10% of the trips were using the Gilmore, it's an additional 50 or 60 trips into an intersection which is already heavily congested. We also don't believe that all 38% of the trips that are expected to use I-93 coming up from the south will stay on I-93. We feel some of them are going to want to avoid the congested central artery in downtown Boston, and when they make that decision, one of the options they have is to get off of I-90 or to come through Alston, Brighton, and cut through Cambridge, a direct route right up River Western and Prospect Street to Washington Street. One of the things that we're incredibly proud of is that we've been working on development in Kendall Square. Hopefully people realize that there's been a huge improvement in and new activity in Kendall Square. 45% of the people who commute to and from jobs in Kendall Square are coming from the north and northwest areas that are in the same direction that the casino is from the city. So we are concerned about the big increase of traffic, and we obviously want to continue to have Kendall Square as a vibrant and growing area. We've had 4 million square feet of development that's been added in Kendall Square, and the percentage of employees that are driving to work at those establishments in the last 10 years have dropped from 55% of people driving to 43% of people driving. And we are working incredibly hard. We have innovative ordinances. We're active in the permitting process for large projects to encourage them to use transit, to walk, to bike, and we're trying to make sure that we're effectively using the scarce resource of the roadway system that feeds this area. We feel we've been incredibly successful. The traffic counts we're doing is showing that traffic growth in Kendall Square has been flat even while we've added 4 million square feet of development. The casino is assuming that 77% of their patrons are going to drive, so obviously this is a grave concern to us. The other issue, key issue for us is transit. We see that the future growth of Kendall Square and of the whole region is greatly enhanced if we can have a really strong and improved transit connection between Sullivan Square and Kendall Square through Leechmere. And we want very much for that to happen. It's been identified by both the MBTA's program and the MPO long-range planning as a key transit need in the area, and we want to make sure that that effort moves forward and that we can be, as a region, as creative and innovative as possible in making that transit connection. And that's a connection that is affecting other surrounding communities, and everybody needs to be at the table in making that happen. So in summary, I think what we're saying is we feel that there are challenges here, obviously, in terms of traffic. There are opportunities in terms of transit improvements, and that the surrounding community process is a way of trying to address these, and that Cambridge should be a part of that effort to look for ways to make this a successful effort. Thank you.
Could I'm not sure I understood the last point. What impact on what we're talking about today does the desired transit connection between Kendall and Sullivan Square have? Sounds wonderful, but what impact on what we're trying to decide today does that have?
So I think that one of the ways that one viable way of trying to improve the Sullivan to Kendall transit service availability capacity is service reliability and looking at whether there are ways to have exclusive bus lanes or queue jump for buses or lanes for buses, anything we can do to give them a reliable travel time savings. And there's going to be a huge incentive with casino, with the kinds of trips being generated, for all available space to be used for moving automobiles. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have a balance between what the automobile needs are, but also making sure that space is available to make these transit improvements, and that we don't look back on the implementation of a casino and say, oh, well, we've lost all the space that we would need. And if we can have strong transit, I think it makes a huge benefit to the whole region in terms of being able to keep the existing roadway capacity meeting the vehicle needs, because we're able to provide transit for a large portion of people who would like that.
Got it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Robert Haas. I'm the police commissioner for the city of Cambridge, and I'm really going to talk about a really narrow portion of our concerns with respect to crime impact. We know that crime is a regional problem, and what's particularly interesting about Everett and Cambridge and Somerville is that we've seen a great deal of interplay between the three jurisdictions. And I'm going to talk about three examples of where we've seen this play out. We've seen it in our drug markets between the three cities in terms of the interplay between those three cities and how it's exchanged between them. We also see it with our gang activity in terms of Metro Gang Task Force. And for many years, Cambridge, Everett, and Somerville have all been partners of that Metro Gang Force. And we're seeing those players cross over constantly between our jurisdictions. And lastly, and most importantly, I think the initiative we've had underway now for the last 2 years, we've actually partnered with Everett and Somerville in looking at our high-risk impact players. And we're seeing correlation and transfer of those people between the three jurisdictions over and over again. I think it's short-sighted if we believe that they're going to be relocated or staying in one area. But I think the evidence that we have in the past in terms of that interplay and how it crosses over our jurisdictional lines is just going to be symptomatic of what we're going to see in the future if there is, in fact, an influx in crime. I will tell you, in the last 2 years, we've now seen in the last year alone, we've seen a 23% decrease in our violent crime. It's a dramatic decrease, and I really attribute it to the partnership that we've had with Somerville and Everett, and both those jurisdictions have seen equal reductions in their crime. Prior to that, we were seeing maybe 2-3% reductions, and this is a dramatic increase. And I think it's because of the correlation and collaboration we've had between our jurisdictions that we're actually seeing that downplay. And I think if we don't maintain that kind of partnership relationship, we're going to be back in a reactionary posture, waiting for crime to happen and trying to deal with it. I think the partnerships we've established now have worked really well for us, and I think it'll continue to work and bear well for us in terms of going forward. And I think that's why anything that happens in Everett, we're going to feel it in Cambridge and vice versa. We're getting away from this whole displacement notion where we're just pushing crime from one place to another, and we've really been communicating in terms of being able to identify patterns and trends very early, reacting to them and stopping them. So I think the collaboration and partnership is extremely important. I think it needs to be maintained if, in fact, Everett's going to be successful in its venture.
And how, Chief, does that impact on the mitigation that you think would be appropriate?
So I think I think what we're concerned about is, I think Lee indicated in his testimony, is it's not so much about monies, but the opportunities that as a surrounding community we'd have access to in terms of being able to maintain and enhance that partnership and collaboration with Everett.
Is there anything that gets in the way of maintaining this working relationship if you're not designated a surrounding community?
And I just think it enhances our position.
Okay.
Commissioner, do you realize that there's a group, well, there's an extensive research program that's starting here, and one of the aspects will be to look at a baseline of crime in the region, and then being able to characterize crime once a casino is built, so that we know if in fact any uptick is related to the casino. So there really are efforts going on now that I'm sure you'll be a part of, actually. They're just starting to put groups together to talk about, and frankly, I'll make sure that you are included in that baseline and those continued discussions to identify one of the problems in other, and you're probably aware of this, other jurisdictions is the inability to identify if in fact the casino had something to do with the uptick, or maybe there was no increase in crime, but being able to label or identify, and that may take some reporting changes, if in fact that crime is related to a casino in the region. So I just wanted you to be aware, and I'll make sure you're a part of that
No, I am aware of
group.
that, Commissioner. I think the thing that we're concerned about, quite honestly, is I think, and it's not so much the casino in this operation, I just think it's the fallout and the collateral effect that takes effect when you have something like that taking place. What does that look like? So, I mean, I was in New Jersey when Atlantic City was actually opening up, and, started to see some of the residual effects from that, and some of how it kind of spread across away from Atlantic City.
Who were you with in New Jersey?
I was in Morristown.
Oh, you were? Okay.
So I've seen some of that, and again, I'm not saying there's going to be a direct correlation between the activity in the casino itself, but what are the collateral effects that are taking place? I mean, one of the big concerns we're seeing now in our region is human trafficking. We're starting to see a lot more of that taking place. I suspect we may see some more of that taking place as a result of just the nature of what activities will take place as a result of the casino itself.
Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Kim Sinatra from Wynn Resorts, here on behalf of Wynn, Massachusetts. Thank you so much for having us here today. I thought what we would do is I'd like to introduce the folks who are here to answer any questions and provide information today. I would also like to, before we start, thank staff, because the AMBA has been pushing people around a bit, and to great effect, I think, taking a lot off of your plate. So we appreciate both John and the rest of the staff and their assistance with this task. I have beside me our own Harvard and MIT guy, Chris Gordon. Chris has been working with us for over a year. He's been coordinating all of the construction and development-related activities here in Massachusetts. Chris, in addition to teaching at both Harvard and MIT, has lots of experience on both public and private projects here in Massachusetts and around the world. Next to Chris is Carrie Pike. She is our traffic consultant from Howard Stein Hudson. She has over 20 years of experience, lots of it in the Commonwealth, and so she's here to answer any traffic and transportation-related issues. Next to Carrie is Suzanne Leckert. Suzanne has come from the frigid tundra of New Orleans to join us. She's from TMG, and they prepared our economic impact report that was included with our RFA2 application and is here to answer any economic impacts. We asked Suzanne to do a little bit of additional work on surrounding communities, specifically on this topic, so hopefully she can be helpful. And we have the ever-vigilant Jackie Crum from Wynn here as well. So what we did when we started thinking about surrounding communities is we went directly to the regulation. And Jackie, if you could kick ahead a few slides just to look at that. We were very specific about trying to adhere to the stated definition of what a surrounding community is. So we looked at the regulations, and the first thing that is considered is proximity. We have lots of information on proximity for you. But then we looked, is the transportation infrastructure going to be significantly and adversely affected? Is the community itself to be significantly and adversely affected by the development? Is the community to be significantly and adversely affected by the operation of the establishment? And will the community be significantly and adversely affected by other relevant potential impacts? What we told Cambridge when we met with them yesterday, and I will compliment them on so many of the really innovative things that have happened there. And we continue, regardless of how it comes today, we intend to continue our conversations with Cambridge and all of the regional players, because we want to, if we're lucky enough to be able to come to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we want to be part of regional solutions to all of the issues that they've talked about. That doesn't mean you're a surrounding community, however, because a surrounding community is very specifically defined. And so while we'd like to get folks out of their cars, we'd love to minimize crime, and we'd like to be part of regional task force on all of those items, that doesn't make a community necessarily a surrounding community under the regulation with the attendant required agreements. So I'm going to let Chris talk about sort of where we are on this journey and talk about the work we've done with respect to Cambridge particularly and why we came to the conclusion that they did not fit within the regulatory rubric. Chris?
Thank you, Kim. We're going to briefly give you some background on how we applied the methodology, and then we're going to talk specifically about Cambridge, so bear with us for a few slides on how we actually did this. Just to remind everyone, the communities in red we have designated as surrounding communities. You know, Malden, Medford, Somerville, Chelsea, and Boston. And I should say that since this process started for the petitioning, we've just recently designated Chelsea and Somerville partially as a result of the information they provided through the petition process. So we think the process is working. The ones in blue have also petitioned. However, as you know, recently Melrose and Lynn, we think we have agreements with, so we can talk about that. But today we don't expect to need to address those. We are, of course, today going to address Cambridge and Saugus and make sure we work through those issues with the commission and with those cities. This is a list. You might know Revere did not petition. They're an adjacent community but didn't petition, so that's why we're not addressing them in the map. We've already talked about this, but as Kim said, we try to do it very rigorously. Instead of sort of, folklore and opinions and personal experience, we try to actually go through the criteria as best we could to identify exactly who was the surrounding community, because we thought that was the logical way, of course, to approach it. You all know where Everett is, but I want to talk briefly about proximity, because a lot of these communities have talked about that in some of their petitions. Next slide. This is a matrix that we put together that we wanted to get a bit quantitative about this because everybody talks about who's close and who's not, but we wanted to measure it. So the first column here is the actual length of the common border with some of these communities. These are the ones that we've recognized as surrounding communities. Most of them have a fairly significant common border. We think that's important for a lot of reasons, but it was one metric we decided to use. We also measured the actual distance from our site to their border. Again, these are all sort of, use them as you want, but we thought this was something that was important, is actually how far away they were. And you'll see later in some of the construction impacts, this does matter when you start talking about things like noise, dust, vibration, that sort of stuff. These are the ones that we haven't recognized. And again, it's no disrespect to these communities, but we found them, in this measure, most of them don't have a common border or quite a bit further away. And you'll see later on traffic and other stuff that we just didn't see the same level of impact. Another point we wanted to make, this is our site, as you know, in Everett on the river. It's almost completely surrounded by Everett, with the exception of, as you know, that we've talked about it before, the finger of Boston land that comes in here. And also, almost everything around is industrial property. There are 2 areas of residential. There's an area of residential here, and there's a few residential units on the street here. But most of it is all industrial property, all in Everett, and we take that seriously. So when we think about construction impacts, that's one of the things we like about this site is we can, you don't have the same thing as close-in residential neighbors that you might have on some sites. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and that's one of the great features we think of this site, both for operations and for construction. Next. There's 3 slides here, which I won't go through all the detail because they've been filed with you many times, but there's a summary slide I want to get to in a minute. But this is this is all of the patrons and how they would get to the site. This is all in the filings we've put with you, so we won't go through it. But these are the percentage of our traffic coming and going to the site. Green is coming into the site, and yellow is leaving the site. So this is patrons. Flip that, I'm sorry. Carrie did it, so she's correct. This is the employee one. The reason there's a lot less lines is we're using off-site parking for employees, so we've created 3 employee off-site parking locations, and we're busing them in from there. Next. This is the composite slide, and again, you have all these, but this is the composite slide of what the percentages are. But more important, if you go to the next one, this is it in tabular form, which we think is a lot easier to understand. This shows the 5 communities that we've recognized and the 4 that were petitioned. This is the percentage of our traffic that's directly through those cities coming in and out of our site. Indirect means they're going through another city before they get there. No surprise, you can see that Boston has the biggest chunk. That's primarily through Sullivan Square. Medford has the next biggest chunk. That's coming in through Wellington Circle. Those are 2 areas we really want to focus on from a traffic point of view, and we're meeting with both MDOT and DCR as well as those cities. You can see Malden has a fair bit, Chelsea has a fair bit. Somerville does not have any direct traffic, but we feel they have indirect traffic here. That's traffic that's going through Sullivan Square in Boston and over to Somerville. So even though it's not direct, we felt we should recognize it because it is an impact on them. The other is the numbers are very small, and we'll talk about those in particular when we get to each city, but there's just not a lot of traffic in those cities. And as you look at our DEIR and our application, if you boil it all down, traffic really is our impact. I mean, everything else turned out positive. The negative was traffic, so we decided to focus on that. Again, we won't go through this in detail, but the way the city and the state process works is, first we identify our traffic, then we identify what the problems it causes is, and then we figure out how to mitigate it. So through our environmental process, including all the state agencies, we've identified about $40 million of traffic mitigation that we're going to do, and we think we should. That we think mitigates any impact we have. So this is separate from surrounding communities, separate from anything. This is just funding that we're going to provide for some of the stuff you heard about earlier today, rebuilding Santilli, Sweetser. There's issues in Wellington, issues in Sullivan Square, issues on Broadway, Revere Beach Parkway. All of that is part of our mitigation package, which we're already committing to through our environmental process. Construction, everybody has their own sort of folklore about construction, but we wanted to be much more quantitative. So we looked at 5 standard metrics that are used around the world of whether or not we would impact their construction: noise, dust, erosion, vibration, and traffic. Those are tangible impacts that we can measure, and we're going to be very hard on our construction folks to make sure we don't have these impacts. But when we get to each city, we want to talk to you about what we think you might see in those areas. This is an example. This is a noise contour map that we had developed. This is our site. We asked them to take the middle of the site and take the worst construction noise we would develop, which is primarily putting in the sheathing and the piles at the beginning of the project, and then measure the decibel levels to all the areas around us. You can't quite read these decibels on the slide, I apologize, but by the time you get across the river and you're out into Somerville, you get down to an area, as the traffic folks labeled it, and this is national numbers, this is in our language, quiet suburban residential areas at night. That's about as quiet as you can get. So that means you really will not be able to hear much of anything when you get over towards Somerville, and certainly not beyond that. So we think the numbers are quite low on construction noise. I'm going to turn it over to Susanna, who's going to talk about how we talked about economic impacts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Commission. In our study, what we did was we projected the potential impacts that the Wynn Everett facility would have on the entire Commonwealth. In doing so, we utilized the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis RIMS-2 system. This is an input-output modeling system. And the BEA sets multipliers for specific industries specific to each state in the country. And when these are applied to certain inputs, these multipliers very accurately project the impacts of an industry or a development on a statewide economy. Now, these multipliers are for distinct segments such as casino operations, hotel, food and beverage, retail, advertising, and general administration. And we used these multipliers from the BEA for these segments, and they projected both jobs and other impacts throughout the community. This graphic just very, very briefly details what goes into these models and what comes out. The projections of total new jobs in the Commonwealth as well as total new earnings. Now, in our study, which you should have all received a copy of some time ago, we projected 5,144 new jobs, or rather FTEs, throughout the state, 3,287 direct, 1,858 indirect and induced FTEs throughout the Commonwealth. In addition, $270 million in new earnings, $136 million attributed to direct on-site earnings at the Wynn Everett facility, and another $134 million indirect and induced earnings throughout the Commonwealth. Now, before I go on, actually, if you can go back to that slide, what we did after making the statewide projections was then we looked at things on more of a community level, because the RIMS-2 model is a statewide model. Even though it's a statewide model, we really didn't believe that all of the impacts would be distributed equally across the Commonwealth. So what we did was, following the commitments made by Wynn Resorts, we assumed that 75% of all of the induced and indirect impacts would be felt within about a 30-minute drive of the Wynn Everett facility. That's about 1,400 of the indirect and induced jobs, and nearly, a little bit over $203 million of the earnings being shared by those living within a 30-minute drive of the Wynn Everett facility. And then finally, we took into account the size of those populations and their relative distance to the Everett facility. And this resulted in estimates of the jobs and earnings impacts that each individual community could expect Now, in terms of impacts on residential property values, in our research, we've not found that the presence of a casino has negative impacts on residential housing values. And often we've found that communities with a casino, they experience either more stable housing markets or stronger growth than the rest of their states. And here I've just got, this is one example. This is Newport Grand. Newport Grand opened in 1992, and before this time, Newport County's median housing values were slightly lower than the state average. After the casino opened, it flip-flopped, and they've grown at a stronger clip than the statewide average. And here's another example over in Philadelphia with regard to the Harrah's facility in Chester. In the first year after the casino opened, housing values in the immediate area grew at a slightly faster pace than the rest of the state. Data for 2012 shows that while housing values declined slightly, they didn't do so dramatically, and they weren't out of line with what the rest of the state was experiencing.
So I think one of the things that we wanted to show, and this is a table that is included within our RFA2 application. And basically what it does is model a year of operations and the 25% gaming tax to the state, and breaks it into the various baskets that the legislation establishes. Because one of the things that I mentioned earlier that we want to make sure that communities take some comfort from is just because you're not either a host community or a surrounding community pursuant to an agreement with a dedicated revenue stream, that the legislature provided really quite generously for many things that communities care about. I guess I would highlight from this slide the Cultural Council, which could expect $4.2 million a year, the Tourism Fund at $2 million, the Community Mitigation Fund of $13 million, again, on an annual basis, Local Capital Projects Fund of $9 million, local aid of over $40 million incremental. We can skip over the Commonwealth Stabilization Fund, Education Fund, Economic Development Fund, because the local communities won't care about that so much for the issues they're talking about now. I look at a Transportation Infrastructure and Development Fund of an additional 30. So that's over and above what we've committed to as a one-time basis, which is over $40 million. And then the surrounding communities that we have agreed with for additional traffic and infrastructure development. The Public Health Trust Fund, again, $10 million, a lot of that can deal with the social impacts that people are worried about should they occur. And so my point of including this is to show communities and to remind the Commission that there is significant funding available to address some of the issues raised by folks, even if they don't fit within the definition of a surrounding community.
Unless there's any questions on that, we'd go right into the Cambridge discussion. This obviously shows where Cambridge is compared to the site. You go through Somerville, then you get to Cambridge. Next. This is a traffic slide you'll see for both communities we're addressing today. If there was any traffic projected in Cambridge, you would see it you'd see it labeled on the slide. Our traffic model shows literally no traffic going through Cambridge or either to or from the casino. We have a lot of traffic elsewhere, which you saw on the earlier slides, but none of those arrows, green, yellow, with the numbers on them, go through Cambridge. So our model shows there isn't any impact on Cambridge traffic. Next. We also look closely at the construction impacts, and again, we don't mean to be wise with this slide, but we didn't find any. It's too far away for the things you'd measure from construction. You saw the noise contour map, noise, dust, erosion, vibration, all that. We just don't see any of it for our construction operation at all. This is an economic impact that Suzanne talked about earlier. This shows about $11 million positive economic impact. So instead of it being a negative impact, we view it as quite a positive, which of course wouldn't be mitigated. So finally, our conclusion on Cambridge, with all due respect, was that it wouldn't be designated as surrounding community because we couldn't identify any impact, and certainly not anything significant and adverse as the legislation requires.
Anybody?
Could you quickly go back to that estimated impacts from Wynn Everett on Cambridge, the earnings
Economic?
impact?
Yep. This one?
Just walk through that final number.
Oh, you got to it.
That number came from the statewide projections for induced induced earnings impacts, and that was allocated to Cambridge based on the size of the population and the distance from Everett. And those are new household earnings that are a result of the presence of the Wynn Everett facility.
Thank you.
That concludes our presentation.
Did you folks have anything else you wanted to respond with?
I think I just want to reiterate 2 points to relate my comments to the slides that were just shown. We are, as a community, surrounded by surrounding communities as part of the identification of the surrounding communities, and feel that we share many of the challenges and impacts of those communities that have been identified. And secondly, the slide that was just shown that showed the roads in Cambridge that would potentially have traffic on them from the casino all run east-west, and the comments I was making were traffic that we expect to see essentially running north-south or northeast-southwest through our community. And I have a little trouble figuring out how a 4% traffic volume from the site that ends a few blocks short of the Cambridge border will have 0 trips in Cambridge. Thank you.
Well, could you look at that? Could you look at that chart and bring that?
Sure.
bring that-
And Carrie did that chart, so we can address that if you'd
Yeah,
like.
I mean, Ms. Sue, where would you see trips coming from? Like, where on this map would you see Cambridge traffic, through Cambridge traffic starting from?
So the 2 areas of concern are essentially the corridor that is running from the Mass Pike exit toward the casino. So it runs.
In Alston.
Right, so it's running diagonally right. If I had a pointer, I would point, but diagonally across the. Excellent. I just have to figure out how to use it. Okay, so we're concerned about running this way, that people are going to shortcut through the city to get over to here. And the other area that we're concerned about is people who don't stay on Mem Drive or don't stay on 93, who are cutting through through either First Street or Land Boulevard, or even worse, through the East Cambridge neighborhood, who are trying to make this move across this way instead of going around. Those are the 2 areas where we see traffic today and where we would expect that the casino would add additional traffic, and those are the areas we're concerned about.
Can we address that?
Can I have the pointer back?
Thank you.
Good morning, Carrie Pike from Howard Stein Hudson, traffic consultant for the Wynn team. So just to address Ms. Clippinger's concerns, I think one of the items she was talking about was the 4% coming across what's Cambridge Street in Boston that ends up in Somerville, heading towards Union Square. We think that traffic is going to be dispersed. It's 4%, which is a relatively small amount. And as you know, some of it is Somerville residents, some of it, a small piece of that may be going Union Square into Prospect Street. The concern with respect to folks getting off of the Turnpike in Alston and cutting through Cambridge to sort of whether they do Memorial Drive or kind of wending their way through Cambridge and Somerville to get over here. Last night I actually did a little quick Google Maps. Let's see how, what it tells us about travel times and distances. If a person, say we're coming from Newton Center and using the Turnpike to then use I-93, getting off at Sullivan Square to go to the Wynn Everett site, that travel distance-wise is actually a couple of miles longer than getting off here in Alston and using Memorial Drive over to Rutherford Avenue and up across the Alfred Street Bridge. But time-wise, it's actually a minute shorter, primarily because of all the signals that you have to go through on Memorial Drive. The speed is slower. It has 10-foot travel lanes, sometimes 9-foot travel lanes, so you can't travel it, even though the speed limit on the Turnpike is 45, you can't travel at 60 miles an hour. And then I did that at rush hour last night. So even with rush hour traffic, it was actually 3 minutes faster in rush hour to stay on the regional highways to get to our site if you're coming via the turnpike. So we don't necessarily think that folks are going to be induced to go through Cambridge and sit at all of those red lights as they weave their way through Cambridge and or Somerville. I also just wanted to quickly, if I could, address the concern about transit connections. I think, as Kim stated, we are also concerned about those pieces and wanting to be able to preserve those. And we think part of our mitigation package is working with the City of Boston on the Sullivan Square Rutherford Avenue project, which addresses some of those bus connections that Ms. Clippinger was talking about. And certainly, if that project were to go forward, that would be one of the key pieces to think about. We want the transit pieces to work too, because we are presuming that our employees particularly will be able to, we want them to be able to use transit and then connect to shuttles that go directly to the WIN, and to be able to do that efficiently. So the plan that the City of Boston has for the Sullivan Square and Rutherford Avenue is intended, I think, to address all of those pieces.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I say one more
Sure.
thing? One of the other traffic concerns and thoughts we have is that the casino traffic, which is going to the casino, may be taking space on roadways which are currently being used by other commuters who are coming to Kendall Square or other areas, so that some of the impact isn't necessarily just people who are going directly to the casino, but it's the casino's use of capacity within the system, which may cause other commuters to seek alternate routes. And those also obviously are going to affect us and adversely in many cases.
Just one minor point there. As you remember from our filing, our peak is at 9 o'clock at night. So we wouldn't envision impacting many commuters in the system-wide network, because most of our peak is quite different from the commuting peak.
Sir, is there any impact with respect to shift changes, workers coming in? They're not,
Yeah,
they are coming in at rush.
Yeah, the model we set up, and we can get it to you again if you want, but the model in the application shows a very detailed, granular shift change forecast. And you're correct, during the day and the evenings, there's actually different shift changes 24 hours a day, but they're minuscule compared to the peak, which is Friday and Saturday nights, when you'd see the most traffic.
Okay.
And the models that we show, the drawings that we showed reflect all that.
Anybody else?
Could we go back to the slide where you have all the percentages, please?
Sure. Of traffic?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a ways back.
yeah, it is.
Yep. Keep going. There it is.
No,
This one or
I'm
the
sorry, the
diagram?
one, the diagram.
This is the,
That previous, no, before that,
keep going.
keep going back.
This is the
Bingo,
patrons.
Bingo.
Yeah.
You've got down here through, coming out of Boston.
Yep.
Down here?
Yeah, down there. On the right-hand side, I understand where that is. What is the route on the left-hand side of that
Here?
duo? Yeah, that one. What is that?
93.
Yeah, the
Oh,
intent.
that's 93.
Right, so
Okay.
the numbers on the left are 93, and the ones on the right are the traffic on Rutherford
Gotcha.
Avenue.
And then you get off 93 at 16, is that it? Up at the top?
No, you're getting off, if they're coming up from the south, they're getting off at Sullivan Square.
Getting off at
So
Sullivan
the
Square.
exit, I think it's exit 28,
Okay.
which is the
All right, so
off-ramp.
both of those wind up in Sullivan Square. Okay,
Correct,
got it.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
All set? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rich.
you.
Thank you.
We will be back in touch.
We take
Let's
a
take a
quick break.
yeah, we'll have about a 10-minute break. We are back in session, whoa, at 10 minutes past 11, and we are, I believe, going to Saugus, or at least Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So I'm going to ask the representatives from Saugus to come down to the table, and I'll ask Mr. Crabtree to give introductions to the team. Following that, we will have the final presentation from the WIN group, and that will conclude our surrounding community presentations for today. As I referenced at the beginning of this meeting, Saugus has filed an involuntary disbursements petition. I've talked to them about the fact that there is a time for response by the applicant, and also noted that it's likely someone will talk about it anyway, but pursuant to our regs, we have some time periods for responses from the applicants.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Thanks to you and through you to the commissioners for hearing from us today. I'm Ray Osrodis. I represent the town of Saugus. I'm with the law firm Arrowwood Peters here in Boston. And with me is Scott Crabtree, town manager. We also have Dan Murphy with CDM, Robert Luongo, the economic development coordinator for the town of Saugus, as well as Donald McQuaid, the fire chief, and Dominic DeMella, the police chief for the town of Saugus. We're all here today to talk, obviously, about the surrounding community designation to which the town believes it's entitled. We'll have each individual talk about sort of their area of expertise, but just as a rough overview, the commission is certainly aware that proximity is an issue. We did provide written testimony, which was handed to commission staff this morning, as well as to Wynn Resorts Council. And if I could direct everyone's attention to page 3 of that written statement, you see a map which reflects proximity both as regards to the casino as well as the border of Everett itself. By our calculation, with regard to the host community border, that's less than 2 miles along Route 99, 1.9 miles to be precise, less than 5 miles from the proposed casino. By our calculation, it's 4.2 miles to the Saugus border from the Wynn proposed site, and 4.5 miles from the Route 99, Route 1 interchange. If you see where Route 99 ends at the Wynn proposed casino, north where it hits Route 1 is in Saugus. If I could actually request one of the slides, which we hadn't seen before, to be put back up, showing proximity of non-adjacent communities. I don't know if that's still available.
The wind slide?
Yes, please.
Do you want the matrix?
The distance that showed respective distance.
Keep going back. That's it.
Thank you. It's notable to us, at least in seeing this today, it's our understanding that Lynn and Melrose have reached agreement as to surrounding community designation, that neither are adjacent.
Time out. I'll just let you correct. We did not designate either Lynn or Melrose as surrounding communities.
Oh, okay.
We entered
My
into
mistake.
neighboring community agreements with them. As I noted when we were talking with Cambridge, is that we have not abandoned anyone who has reasonable discussion with our company. And so it's important to be clear, though, we have continued to adhere very closely to the regulations. Our conclusion, which Chris will review in greater detail with respect to Saugus, is that does not fulfill the regulatory requirements of a surrounding community.
Right, we'll get to that.
Right, but neither did Lynn or Melrose, and I just wanted to let council know that we did not designate them as surrounding community.
Thank you for the clarification. I knew that they had been on the document and petitioned, and it was what I understood from the prior testimony that had been the case. In any event, as a couple of notable points with regard, moving on from proximity with regard to transportation, as we'll hear from CDM and Mr. Murphy, and the attached report which has been provided with our written testimony today, using WINS numbers. Again, Saugus has not had the opportunity to perform its own methodology, for example, to try and make an estimation as to the impact. But using wind zone numbers, Route 1 through Saugus is estimated to carry 11% of the traffic to and from the proposed casino. And getting on to the question of operational impacts, so to speak, of the proposed casino, Saugus really does believe, and you'll hear from its officials, that there are a few public safety impacts with regard to police, the impact of that additional traffic and congestion, potential for social crime, as well as the impact on the mutual aid agreements which are in place, which were submitted with our original petition to the commission with Everett, to which Everett's a party, as well as Saugus. And as to fire, Everett and Saugus are both parties to a mutual aid agreement comparable to the police, and we'll be able to hear about the impact on response time when there is increased congestion. Furthermore, one of the impacts that Saugus anticipates is economic in nature. Saugus has a thriving and significant retail component to its local economy. both primarily on Route 1, but throughout the community. And the Wynn Resort, through interviews with proprietors of business in Saugus, would be a competitor. It would not necessarily just be a rising tide lifting all boats, but it would be a situation where people with limited income would choose one or the other, and that would reflect an impact both on Saugus's meals tax, as well as, in the event of any businesses that were lost, potential abatement as to those properties. In addition, we'll hear about very specific issues with regard to Saugus historically and its zoning, its current zoning laws, and its present inability in any instance to take advantage of what would be seen as secondary impacts, positive impacts of the Wynn Casino. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to Dan Murphy from CDM to talk about the report that was attached to the written statement and also traffic more generally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to just summarize real quickly the memo that it's attached. The point being that Route 1, it's not a typical limited access highway. There are a lot of abutters with direct access onto Route 1. It carries close to 100,000 vehicles a day. And as the project has stated, they'll be adding about 11% north of the Route 99 merge.
11% of the 100,000?
No, 11% of their
11%
project
its
trip traffic.
Yeah, right.
11% of their project trip traffic will be traveling via Route 1 north of Route 99. And Route 1 already operates at bad levels, level of service E, level of service F, based on various studies and various projects. And the addition of those vehicles will cause vehicles to divert, whether they be local traffic that would have normally gotten on Route 1 on the north side of the town to travel south or vice versa, or local regional traffic. The long regional project trips will likely stay on Route 1 because they're not familiar with the side roads and other routes that can be taken to the project site. The other concern for the town is the interchanges. Again, those interchanges are the only opportunity to pass from one side of town to the other. So there are 4 locations where they can traverse from one side to the other. And as those interchanges become more congestive, obviously that could have an impact on emergency response times, as well as the local traffic. That's about it. There is concern for the town that the trips that will be added to Route 1 will create diversion, which will create problems for not only zone interchanges, but adjacent intersections on alternate routes.
How many trips is the 11%?
The 11% will be about 1,800.
1,800 trips. That's per hour at max, or?
That's in the peak hour.
That's in the peak hour, okay. Somebody else, where are you?
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to now move on to what would be potential likely public safety impacts. And with that, if I could ask Chief DeMella to take the microphone and discuss that issue.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
As far as public safety impacts, specifically on the police department, we feel that any increase in traffic on Route 1 will have an effect on the town and on public safety as far as our response times go. People, when Route 1 is tied up now, they find the back roads in Saugus to try to avoid those traffic jams on Route 1. It's a very heavily traveled road, and I believe this will have an impact on the traffic and on the side roads of town, which, in my opinion, will increase our response times to accidents and other emergencies like medical. And so I believe, it'll definitely have an impact, a detrimental impact on traffic and put a strain on our resources as a police department. Another thing that I believe would be a fallout from the casino, not necessarily at the casino, but around the casino, would be social crimes. On Route 1, we have a number of motels and small hotels that people can stay in if they're not going to stay at the casino themselves, which could bring about other issues like OUI, operating under the influence of liquor, drugs, domestic violence, social issues that would be caused by, the additional people staying at those hotels and motels. Also, potentially prostitution. As you know, that can be a fallout from a business like this. So, social crimes, that would be another issue that would put a additional strain on the police department. Also, we have a MOU signed with Everett, Chelsea, Malden, and Revere, where we share our resources, our detectives and police officers. And it's been in effect for a while because, as you know, crimes don't stay in one specific area, they cross borders. And so if Everett has more need for officers and crimes, then obviously it would take away from my department, because our resources would be sent to Everett. And as the MOU was signed with Everett, Chelsea, Malden, and Revere, 3 of those communities are designated as surrounding communities. So I believe the MOU shows that we've already been collaborating with them. We have a signed MOU, and our resources are all used together to try to combat these crimes. So in closing, I believe those are the 3 major areas that will impact my department. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, good morning. I just wanted to note and add, and maybe the chief can speak on it, but so that you get an understanding of Route 1. It is a state highway, but Saugus and Saugus Law Enforcement is the primary response up on Route 1, and probably you might know the percentage of the accidents that we book rather than the state police because of their limited resources. But it's probably somewhere north of 80% of the accidents up on Route 1 that we handle in the incidents and calls.
Yes, historically, we have patrolled Route 1. We share with the state police, but in Saugus, we predominantly book most of the accidents there. So Route 1 calls for service is a big drain on a small department like mine, and any additional traffic would have a negative impact on that.
Okay.
And Chief McQuaid, if you could perhaps speak to the impact as to fire.
Good morning. Looking at the situation from my perspective as the fire chief, as the WIN representative said, it's all about the increase in traffic the casino will cause. Saugus doesn't have a large fire department. We have a ladder and 2 pumps in service. If there's more traffic on the highway, there's going to be more accidents. It's short and sweet, it's simple. If we have apparatus tied up on the highway, building fire on the other side of town, it could significantly affect how we fight the fire, put the guys in danger, put the civilians in danger. It's definitely going to affect us. It's basically, if you're coming from the North Shore, you're going to use Route 1. That's going to be the main thoroughfare. And again, more people on the highway, more accidents. We have 6:30 in the morning till 9:30 in the morning where it's real bad on Route 1, and then again in the afternoon. As the WIN representative said, maybe the times will be different because it won't be till 9 o'clock in the evening when their traffic hits. But when they're leaving the casinos, potentially 1 or 2 of them might have had a drink. So again, they're going to be coming back down Route 1, going home, accidents again. If we have backups on the highway, our response times are going to be more difficult. It's going to take us longer to get there. The quicker we get there, the better it is for the patients that are injured on the scene. And we also have a reciprocal agreement. Saugus and Everett and all the surrounding communities are in the Metro Fire District. And again, I'm going to get back to the traffic. There's 35 communities, all in the Metro Fire District. And if we can't get from one place to another, if Everett has a fire, if Saugus has a fire, they mutually, like I said, the mutual aid, they come to us, we go to them. It's just going to be more difficult to get anywhere you need to go. The response times are going to be longer. This is going to be a very large building, thousands of fire prevention devices in the building. Everett's going to be tied up much more often going to these buildings, and this whole situation is going to affect Saugus. I mean, I'm not sure what the term was, but the people from Lynn that are going to be coming through Saugus to get to Everett, so definitely affects Saugus.
Mr. Chairman, it should be noted also to the commission that the fire stations that we have 2 fire stations, and as the chief talked about, both of those stations are located on the east side of Route 1. So we don't have a station that's on the west side, on the other side of Route 1. And obviously with the traffic impact and what we think with our overpasses and interchanges, that could cause more significant time delay to get to the other side, on the west side of the town to answer calls.
And really moving on to what I guess I'd call the economic and retail impacts, it's my understanding from the applicant, that at least a significant portion of the revenue generated by the proposed resort casino would be not gaming, but actually entertainment and meals and the like. And to the extent that that's the case, given Saugus's local economy, Saugus certainly believes there will be an impact, and its economic development coordinator, Mr. Luongo, again, without the benefit of a complicated economic survey, was able to perform an informal survey of businesses in Saugus to discuss what impact they foresee. And so I'd like to pass the floor to Mr. Luongo.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm here to briefly talk about the impacts of the casino on the local retail, entertainment, and service establishments in Saugus. And just let me quickly set the stage. Saugus is a bedroom community, about 11 square miles, and basically the 3-mile stretch of Route 1 in Saugus serves as our town's primary economic engine. We have no other industrial parks, really no commercial centers other than Route 1. So Saugus is in a unique situation in which that 3-mile stretch of the Route 1 corridor serves as the town's primary economic engine. It functions as our main street, as our downtown, as our regional mall, as our office park, as our light industrial park. We even have Saugus High School is located on Route 1. So that, for us, is our downtown, fortunately or unfortunately. And quite frankly, without a vibrant Route 1, the town of Saugus will be in serious financial constraints. That's kind of like the stage I'd like to set. Saugus is one of the top 20 communities in Massachusetts in terms of revenue generated by local meals tax. To us, that means we get about $1 million a year in local meals tax and a budget of about $80 million. So that is a significant amount of taxes that we depend on to try to balance our town's budget and provide services for our citizens. Our businesses on Route 1 really encompass a wide breadth. We have quite a diversity, as I mentioned. We have high-end establishments, and then we service the middle and working class as well on Route 1. I did an informal survey. I'm a staff of one, so I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have a large budget. Maybe the town manager will increase it if I do well. Basically, I've interviewed 5 establishments on Route 1, and they're mostly restaurant and entertainment venues. And spoke to them about what they felt the impacts would be. And they basically were concerned about discretionary entertainment dollars, limited discretionary entertainment dollars being spent at the casino, and they perhaps would be losing business. They've also expressed concern that even though traffic can be a plus for strip mall developments or strip developments, they fear any increases in traffic could be more detrimental to them and discourage people coming into their facilities. If any of you have ever traveled on Route 1, you know you're taking your life in your hand, either an ingress or egress into a facility. I do that every day, and I make the sign of the cross as I go out in there. It can be brutal. So they're actually concerned about weekend traffic, which we hope the casino would be successful in drawing people on weekends, but actually by increasing traffic on the weekends, less traffic would go into their establishment. So that surprised me in a way, that would have an impact. Saugus needs to be competitive in the marketplace. And there's a lot of demand, there's a lot of other developments taking place that are really sucking retail away from Saugus. The recently opened Market Street up in Winfield, that is having an impact on Saugus. We don't expect the commission or wind development to solve Saugus' problems. What we're asking for is a level playing field so our businesses won't be negatively impacted, can compete, and generate the revenue that we need here in Saugus.
How do you create that level playing field? What are you asking for?
Well, I guess what we're asking for, quite frankly, is a seat at the table so we can discuss these issues with WIN and see how that we can negate any of these impacts either through some traffic mitigation or what have you. We're not asking for them to do our zoning for us or create other opportunities for us. But I think a traffic engineer can attest to the fact that we have one of the highest accident rates. Our interchanges at Main Street and Walnut Street and Essex Street have some of the highest accident rates in the state. Increasing the traffic volume, especially on weekends, could create more problems. So one of the asks is probably to help us look at some of these traffic issues that are impacting the Route 1 corridor as a result of, we feel, of some increased traffic, obviously, on Route 1 to go to the casino. And there are tons of studies out there. I just quickly did a search. There had been a study done in 2005 on it was called the Casino Gamble in Massachusetts. And basically, it said 2 things that I just want to bring out. It said basically commercial casinos were shown to create reduced earnings in hospitality and retail businesses located within 50 miles. Also, it stated that commercial casinos reduced general merchandise earning 13% among businesses inside a 50-mile radius of a commercial casino. This study kind of like reinforces what I heard from the 5 businesses that I had interviewed about their concerns about losing revenue from the project. Even though more people will be traveling through Saugus, the traffic congestion created, the configuration of the roadways, it would probably make them lose business. I'll quickly wrap up here. I don't want to monopolize this. But basically, what we're doing with the Route 1 area is we're rethinking land uses along the corridor. Okay, we need to do this in order to be more competitive. Unfortunately, Route 1, if you're familiar with it, is surrounded on both sides of the north and south side residential properties. So there's not much opportunity for us to rethink and capture more market share. Our zoning right now prohibits or dissuades hotel development because of these issues with traffic and the abutting residential area. But we're still looking at opportunities to create zoning so we can capture some of the hopefully positive economic generations from the wind development. But right now, we need to maintain what is in place, because what is in place is giving us revenue to support our services in Saugus. So if we start losing businesses in Saugus, we're going to have a difficult time in creating the services for the residents of our community. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
A couple of quick questions. How many hotels run along that Route 1?
In Saugus,
Strip.
I mean, the strip goes all the way up to Danvers, basically.
Yeah.
Scott, do you know?
Yeah, essentially, I think we have, in Saugus, we have we have one hotel, we have a Red Roof Inn, a Holiday Inn Express, and we have a couple of motels. We have some 3 or 4 motels that are located on Route 1 that are somewhat, and I think the chief touched upon it a little bit, the police chief, somewhat problematic with, different issues there, crime-wise and drugs and whatnot. So that's essentially how the makeup is of the motels and hotels.
Do you have any estimate as to what the occupancy rate is? Obviously, it can fluctuate depending on the time of year.
It could be up as high as some periods of 80%. There's a lot of activity because of the airport. Obviously, that's a generator for us, but there is fairly high occupancy rate at certain times. People who don't want to go into the airport and stay, or go into Boston and stay. There's obviously the people from the north coming down from New Hampshire and Maine.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, there has been development with some hotels that are over the line into Peabody in the last recent years, but Saugus historically as Mr. Luongo spoke about, zoning-wise is not in a position to be able to embrace that type of development.
Anybody else? Saugus is a host community, or do you have another speaker?
I think that Mr. Murphy just had a quick follow-up based upon a point that was made.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one clarifying point to correct the statement that I made. You had asked what 11% of those trips would be on Route 1, and the number I responded with is the project-generated trips. So the 11% that would be on Route 1 would be in the order of magnitude of 200 trips. And with the stop-and-go nature of Route 1, as Mr. Luongo stated, there are a high number of accidents, and those numbers are included in the memo that's in your testimony.
Yeah.
So that does exacerbate things.
Saugus is a surrounding community to Mohegan Sun.
Yes, that's right. After discussions, we reached agreement to secure that designation with Mohegan Sun, which we have placed on file with the commission.
But there's no agreement yet. You've just agreed to negotiate.
That's correct.
And what are the principal concerns? Are they the same concerns?
They're similar in
Essentially.
nature.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a question of Mr. Murphy from traffic. You mentioned that Route 1 is at a level of service of E or F.
Yes, during the peak hours, studies have shown that they do operate at level of service F. The intersections and interchanges get heavily congested.
Is this in the intersections you were mentioning earlier in Saugus?
I'm sorry?
And are these the intersections that you mentioned in Saugus or throughout?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah, in particular, the Walnut Street interchange, that's scheduled to be reconstructed beginning in 2016, recognizing the fact that it does have a high incident of accidents. There were 72 accidents there in 2011. All 4 of the interchanges show up on the Mass DOT 2011 crash clusters map. because of congestion. You know, you have a lot of rear-end accidents when you have traffic entering and exiting the traffic stream at on-ramps and off-ramps. So yes, those are the intersections that I was speaking of.
And the peak hours are rush hour in the morning and the afternoon, I take it?
Yes.
Anybody else? Wind Resorts?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to conclude with, just to give a little bit of background on myself. I'm a lifelong resident of Saugus. I also served as a police officer on the Saugus Police Department for approximately 11 years. I've also served the community as on the Board of Selectmen and as chairman, which are the traffic commissioners for the town. I now serve in the capacity as the town manager there. And just to give a background of Saugus in the sense of economic development, we're a senior community, which we're proud of, and with that comes difficulty historically to make any kind of changes. We have a town form of government with a representative town meeting, which is made up of 50 town meeting members elected in 10 precincts, which is the smallest in the state. Makes much difficulty in trying to take advantage of economic development and planning for the future and being proactive. Since coming on as manager in 2012, I was able to get the support of town meeting and other town officials to bring on an economic development coordinator that the town hasn't had for more than 20 years. So we're trying to take advantage of that, but it's a difficult process, and that, I think, puts us uniquely situated other than other communities where we're not ahead of the curve and not been in a situation and likely not going to be able to take advantage of this up boom. And I think looking at, this is going to be great for the economy, for the state budget, for those type of things, people making more money. But when you look at the contrast of me being my position as the chief financial officer of the town, I'm looking at an $80 million budget that has to do with operations and delivering services to the community and the quality of life impacts that a casino in Everett is going to have as an impact. And looking at that, I want to reiterate, we're an $80 million budget that's $1 million dependent in present day money on the meals tax and room tax that we generate that allows us to, I think, if we had a 10% decrease or a 20% decrease, because obviously when you're building a casino, part of it is to have entertainment and to keep people there. The people are going to choose, and like we talked about, the pie is only so big. They're either going to spend here or there, and that is sort of our lifeline of what allows us to reclassify taxes so that the commercial tax base and the sustainability of that allows us to provide services to the community. So those are, I guess, the biggest concerns, and I think that puts us different than some of these other communities, even communities that have been designated as a surrounding community, and how we would be significantly adversely affected in that manner.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just in concluding, I also would like to thank the staff of the commission who's been extremely helpful throughout this process. Thank you.
Great. Win.
Okay, thank you. We have a very similar presentation. We won't do the preamble we did last time, but we wanted to go right to the Saugus slides. First, just a reminder, of course, where they are. You've seen this many times. Next. The traffic, I do want to dwell on this for a minute, especially after hearing some of the presentation. And we did have an opportunity to review the CDM Smith information they sent over to us this week. The numbers right now, we're showing 8 and 7% on Route 1. That's slightly different than the 11%. And I don't think they're misrepresenting it, but the 11% is when you don't factor in what we're going to be doing with employee shuttles. So the actual traffic, percentage of our traffic on Route 1 is 8 and 7%. More important is what's the impact on Route 1. And we don't disagree at all with the issues with Route 1, and we certainly don't want to argue about that at all. But our traffic on Route 1 would be roughly 1% increase in our peak hour to Route 1. If you look at 107,000 cars that's on that a day, our traffic is about 1,500 cars a day. In the peak hour, it's 144, and only half that's going in either direction. So we're down to about 65 or 70 cars in the peak hour, which is a Friday night on Route 1. And most of it's going in the opposite direction from the peak commute on Route 1, and we're later than the peak commute. So again, with with no disrespect, we think we have a very small impact on Route 1. It's around 1%. As an example, in the letter that was sent out by CDM Smith, they referenced the recent Super Walmart that was approved on Route 1 and is being built. That produces about 8,300 cars. So we've got about 1/6 of that amount of traffic, and that was viewed as having almost an insignificant impact, and they're required to only fix one signal. So they have about a $65,000 mitigation package for that project. So with being a 1/6 of that traffic, we thought it fell well below the thresholds that we're triggering for all the other improvements we're making for the other parts of the state. So again, we felt the traffic numbers, and again, it isn't to argue with them, but we felt the traffic numbers were so small it didn't trigger anything close to a surrounding community impact. Next, again, on the construction impacts, it's just too far away. Any of our analysis didn't show any impacts for things like noise, dust, erosion, vibration, traffic for construction. Again, we just didn't see any impact from our analysis that we did on all that for Saugus, primarily because of the distance away it is from the site and, of course, from the construction. Next. The economic impacts we found were positive. And in a minute, Kim will talk more about the question of Route 1 businesses, but the actual economic impact from new earnings in Everett, in Saugus are up. They're $3 million additional impacts. So to conclude, we had to draw the line somewhere, and we felt that Saugus fell way below the criteria that the legislature set out for surrounding communities, so we did not designate them. And I know Kim wants to talk a bit about some of the questions that just came up.
Well, I think so. Thanks, Chris. I actually think that was a very complete answer to where we came down on Saugus. I will note that we didn't hear from Saugus until they filed their petition. And so there was no request for discussion or request for expenses until they filed a petition to be recognized as a surrounding community. That said, we had completed all of this type of analysis for the entire region. When we met with Saugus after their petition, we did offer them what we call our neighboring community agreement, which addresses some of the concerns that they raised today. That includes participation in our concierge program, co-marketing on some of their food and beverage outlets, marketing to our employees. We provide sometimes subsidies for our employees to use area businesses. And so there were items like that that we did offer to Saugus because, as I say, we've been quite rigid about adhering to the regulatory requirements with respect to official designation as a surrounding community. That said, we're interested in regional prosperity as a result of our entry into the market if we are so lucky. And so the conversations will continue with Saugus and other communities who believe they're affected. With respect to mutual aid or shared services that have come up a couple of times today, I will not pretend to be schooled in all of the details of those agreements, but I will note that of the host community agreement, $5 million of Everett's annual payment will be dedicated to community impacts that should address holding up Everett's side of the bargain under those agreements. So they will be able to add fire, police, other public safety resources as necessary. That's all I have. Thank you.
I had a quick question of Mr. Gordon. Where is the Walmart that you referenced? Is there a slide that could help us?
I'm not positive. Maybe the folks from Saugus can help.
I can tell you where it is. Yeah. I live in Malden, and I'm well aware where it is.
Okay.
And I wish we had a little bit closer in aerial here, but I think it's right around this area. It's on the northbound side of Route 1. Sorry, not far enough. It's on the northbound side of Route 1. It's 770 Broadway. So I think it's right about in here. I don't know, for anyone's sort of familiar with McDonald's, so it's south of where Home Depot and Barnes & Noble and the Linfells interchanges between Main Street and Linfells Park.
Across from the hilltop on the other side. And I think it just should be noted as far as the Walmart. When the Walmart was put in, there was a traffic study, but it was 6 years old, and out of the wisdom of the local planning board, they did not have a traffic impact study done for a super Walmart. And I guess my question would be to the Wynn organization is that in these studies here, did it take into account the super Walmart being in that location?
Yeah, the traffic analysis took in we did a 10-year projection, including either stuff that was either built or stuff that was approved, and also in some cases stuff that was projected to be approved. So the 10-year window tried to take in all the development that we could find.
Thank you.
If I,
What's
Mr.
going
Chairman.
in, what's going in where Hilltop is?
We're still,
Working on
still working on that, hoping to partner with them, and we're actually awaiting an MAPC grant that'll give us some technical assistance with the rezoning.
You going to keep the cactus?
It probably will not come down, at least the stand. We have a lot of signed bylaws now that don't grandfather anybody in. But I did.
National Historic Monument.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add one point regarding the mutual aid. They talk about the mutual aid agreements, and I think that's great, and the fire chief, if he wanted to speak on it, he could, is that those mutual aid agreements, the way they're designed, is that there is no repayment or reimbursement, so that it's great that Everett would build up their infrastructure or their manpower for fire and police. But if our fire department's responding to a mutual aid agreement, it's our overtime budget that pays for that. And that's the way the agreement's set up. So unless there's some change in that agreement or some regional approach that deals with this, financially, we would be impacted and not have the direct dollars to deal with that.
Anybody else?
Just a quick question about, we heard about the size of the police department, fire department. I can't see the chief, but can you give us information about the size of the police department?
We have 54 sworn officers from me on down. We serve a population roughly around 26,000 people. With Route 1, we have a lot of urban problems because of, the businesses on Route 1, the bars and restaurants. So that impacts us a lot. So we are a fairly small department, and again, we have some urban problems because of Route 1, which severely strains the department.
You have just one station?
We have just one station, yes.
All right. Thank you all very much. We will take this under consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We have one loose end surrounding community topic, and then I think we'll take a lunch break. We had this open question of whether Revere only was a Revere only, in fact, the gaming establishment. And I think Commissioner McHugh's group has taken a look at that and has something to say.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I asked the consultants who I'm using as to assist with the building and site design component of the application to take a look at the application and the plans and the diagrams and the lease agreements that are part of the Mohegan Sun application to see if there were any connections to Boston, and took a look at those myself with their help and assistance. And from those diagrams, it is quite clear that everything they've designed is in Revere, and there are no discernible chunks of the facility in Boston. And the lease agreement that we also took a preliminary look at has the normal things that one would expect to find in a commercial lease. No operational control over how the facility operates, although there is a profit-sharing arrangement and some other things that are typical of a commercial lease. So my view and my recommendation is that we proceed on that brief review, that this is in fact a Revere facility, but leave open the ability of anybody to present to us some concrete suggestion based on those plans or other factual documents that that's not the right way to approach it, that it is in fact into Boston at some point.
Okay.
And I would not propose some kind of a formal vote, motion, or anything. We just leave it on that assumption for the moment.
Okay, that's fine. That satisfies the inquiries I've gotten. So I think we will now take about an hour lunch break, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock for the rest of the items on the agenda.